November 7th. But first, we're going to start off with a summary from the article by Reuters. And that article has been the only one that has been published. There have been other places like Yahoo and the Indian outlet NDTV that have copied Reuters and then have republished it, as outlets do all the time. But aside from that, it's not really being covered. So for those that are interested, those that want to know what happened, and if you don't want to watch 3.5 hours, I get it. I'm going to give you the key points on what happened during that hearing. But one thing that I did actually want to mention before we start reading the summary is, from the get-go, all of the speakers that went to the podium said, from my research, these are authentic. All of these different bodies are authentic. They were not assembled by man. They are 1,000 or more years old. And every single one of them said that because they probably saw what was happening in the news since September 12th when the first hearing was made public. And everyone's saying, fake here, fake there, fake everywhere, alien cake. And I can get it. They look very strange. But these scientists, and almost every single one of them that spoke has doctor in their title, minus one or two. And they said, from my research, these things are authentic. Now, are they extraterrestrials? No, they're not. And we're going to get into that. But they are not saying that it's paper mache, that it's small human children, which is so sad to say to begin with, or animal parts. These are authentic, and it's one entity. And also on top of that, there were scientists that said, we invite you to conduct your own research. And that's, when you open the doors like that, I think that adds a level of validity to the conversation. Because if you keep the doors closed and you say, no one can look at it but me, I am the golden child and only I can see it, it seems a little sketch, doesn't it? But when you begin to open those doors very wide, and they did this last time and they did it yet again for this second hearing, they said, if you want the data, you can collect it. If you want to conduct your own research, you can. And people are kind of avoiding that aspect, and I think that should be spoken about. Of course, when we are having this conversation, those that watched the hearing, those that didn't, I get it if you didn't, people are making up their own minds so quickly saying it's fake or it's real. This was meant to, I think, provide a lot of extra data and fill in the gaps for people that had questions. But yet again, there are those that are so quick to dismiss it. I am not here to tell you to believe it or not. I'm only going to share with you the information that I found interesting and compelling and things that need to be spoken about. So I'm going to share my screen here merely as a visual aid, and we're going to start off with the overall summary of the hearing before we go into step by step on all of the people that spoke, and then highlighting their main points in their speech and talking back and forth. You and I, those that are catching this live, will have a conversation here and see what things we found interesting versus others. So let's get into this. On Tuesday, November 7th, Mexico's Congress received a presentation from researchers who verified the authenticity of a set of three-fingered mummies found in Peru, which have been suggested as possible evidence of non-human life forms. However, they did not endorse the idea that these remains were of extraterrestrial origin. The initial presentation to lawmakers was made by Jaime Maussan, a Mexican journalist and self-proclaimed ufologist. Maussan proposed that the specimen reportedly discovered near the Nazca lines in Peru did not correspond to any known earthly life forms. In the latest section, as the first one was September 12th, Maussan aimed to demonstrate that the specimens, which were not physically presented this time, were genuine, calling upon a series of medical professionals who confirmed that the remains were of actual once living beings while leaving their exact origins open to interpretation. And that's huge right there. Maussan expressed his view that although scientific analysis did not conclusively prove any extraterrestrial origin, the findings could indicate non-terrestrial life forms. And then it goes into a little bit more detail that we're actually going to go into step by step on what certain people said and why they potentially said the things that they did. But first, we have the well, I had it, but we have this man right here, a legislative lawmaker by the name of Sergio Luna, and he was the one that, in a sense, conducted this hearing right next to Jaime Maussan, who was the one that probably prodded him to do so. And he was at the first one, he was at this one as well, obviously both of them. And so the lawmaker Sergio Luna is saying, "Thank you for being here. This Chamber of Deputies, it's all about allowing the people to speak, to having an open mind, and to share our opinions and ideas." And that's what he said in the last one. That's what he said in this one. And I like that he started off with that versus placing this level of criticism or this level of I'm better than you in some senses, where what you're talking about is crazy and none of this is real and blah, blah, blah. When you have that level of bias, right, no one's going to listen to you except people that agree with that. But when you are level-headed and you are attempting to show no bias, which all of us have, and it shows all the time, even when we try not to, aside from that, he is saying, let's have a genuine conversation. Let's talk about this. And then Jaime goes in and he gives his little speech as well. And he thanks the university in Ica, Peru, where there was a lot of tests on the bodies that they were conducted there at that university. And we're actually going to talk about that the president of that university, and I'll give you that name in just a moment, also spoke during this hearing, and that was huge. And I emphasized that in the post commentary when we streamed the hearing live with English translations. If you want to watch that, that link will be in the description box below. But if you just want the quick summary, just keep on watching, listening to this one. So that was really interesting there. And it was because of that university that really helped allow scientists to come together and to conduct research and things that other universities maybe wouldn't be potentially as proud to express publicly, such as this particular one. And then he did mention that they were received from a mine in Cusco, Peru, and that, this is the crazy part. So back it up just a little bit. I don't want to get too ahead of myself here because a lot of information to cover in a short period of time. But on his Twitter, he mentioned days before the hearing, I believe it was November 2nd, he says there's going to be some really big surprises in this hearing. And for those that watched it, you might have rolled your eyes and been like, really? Others might say, oh my gosh, yes, it's crazy, right? We all have our own opinions. But one thing that was shocking here is that in this hearing, he mentioned that there are a bunch of other bodies. There's a bunch of other mummies in the same area, and they're still looking for them, and they found a few. And so that was really big. So we're not just seeing these really tiny ones. We're not just seeing Maria either, which is another mummy that's a lot bigger, but there's a bunch more. And that, I think that went over a lot of people's heads. But if you listen to it, you'll catch it. You'll be like, what? So we might get more information on that a little bit later. But he continues, because he told the Mexican Congress hearing this. These aren't beings that were found from the UFO wreckage. They were found in algae mines and were later fossilized. That's just information for those that weren't aware of that. Now, I need to emphasize this immensely. These Nazca mummies are nothing new. These were found in 2017. There have been documentaries and talks about this. But for the most part, the research was kind of quiet. The information on finding these was made public. There were statements of those that found it. They were kind of like, they're not called treasure pirates, but treasure hunters kind of deal, something that they were fake. And Jaime, in a roundabout sense, addressed this in this 3.5-hour hearing, which is so long. And he says, him and a few others mentioned there might have been some fake ones mixed in with ones that are authentic. And of course, that's a very easy way to cover your tracks and make you look like, more serious, because there's a lot of controversy when it comes to Maussan, where he had shown dolls and said that they were real and they were not. I believe that was also in 2017. And so his credentials, in many respects, went down the drain after that. But mentioning this, oh, there was a mixture of the two, yeah, I think it's a catch-all. And if it's true, amazing. If it's not, yikes, right? Of course. So after that, we get to hear from the first speaker, and this is Jesus Angel Madrigal, and he is an air traffic controller in Mexico. And he must have been, I believe, the only well, no, one, him and the next person were the only two people that didn't really have a doctorate's degree or have doctorate in their title. They weren't a part of medicine in any way. But this is what was really cool. We saw it in the last one, and we're going to see it, and we saw it again in this one. And that was, he was, in a sense, sharing his experience in a roundabout way. He didn't give a specific encounter that he had, but he had mentioned a lot of people in my field are encountering these really weird things. And Jaime says, how often is this happening? And he mentions here, in the year prior to 2023, maybe one or two reports a year. After 2023, like this year alone, it has skyrocketed exponentially. We are getting reports all the time. But then the questions continued, and Luna asks, the legislative Luna asks, well, are these sightings being registered? Are they being written down? Are they being documented? And this was a question that was asked last time. And the exact same answer was given, and that was no, there are no reports, there is no data, people aren't recording this. And later on they said, well, this definitely needs to be recorded. Well, of course it does. It's a silly little statement to make, but it's also very true. It needs to be recorded, and it hasn't been, even in 2023. During his time that he was speaking, Mr. Jesus here, they also shared an audio clip with air traffic control and a pilot. The translation was a little icky. Bless that lady's heart. Being a translator is very difficult. You're not only translating in real time, but you also have to interpret, and those are two very different things. If you're reading a paper, you have to read it. Easy. That's part of translation. But when you have to dissect someone's lingo in their language and then reapply the sentence in the correct sentence structure in a different language, it takes a lot more time than just a second to go ahead and repeat that. So those three translators, they did their absolute best. While it wasn't amazing for us English speakers, it's not an easy job to begin with. I've attempted to do Spanish translations before in the past, in real time, and honestly, these people did amazing. Yes, was it great? No, it wasn't. But they were able to get the point across, so I have to give a big applause for them. And they got ripped. They really did, and they shouldn't have. But back to this here. So there was audio recording that was shared, but there was also 3 videos that were shared. Now here's the odd thing that I wasn't too fond of with those videos. The main point was we weren't really given any information aside from the location and the year. That was it. There wasn't really any analysis on those videos. I think it was just kind of more of eye candy than anything else. And that might be like my biggest complaint about this hearing, was just that little aspect of showing the video twice, 3 times maybe, and then going on to the next topic. I understand that time is limited, but I would have liked to see a little bit more analysis other than just showing the video. One was in China in 2021, another one was in Colombia, I believe in 2023, and then there was one more at an airport, and that was all the information on the third one. I was like, I would have liked a little bit more, but hey, we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere, and you know what? That's what matters. Yeah, Moon at Noon. Syntax and sentence structure. Like, they mess you up when translating in real time. It really does. So we need to cut them just a little bit of slack. Just cut those translators just a little bit of slack here. It's really not easy. Now, if they were given the scripts beforehand, because all the speakers, the majority of them stuck to what they wrote. If the translators had gotten that, that would have been ideal, and maybe that will happen in the next one if we do receive another one. But for those that were just talking off the cuff, that's where it was pretty difficult. Especially when we're dealing with different countries. We saw Mexico, we saw Peru, and we saw Argentina, and then we saw a guy from France speaking Spanish. That was awesome. They all have their different lingo, their own slang, their own words that they use, and so these Mexican translators going from Spanish to English, That's another little aspect that probably wasn't anticipated either. So there is our first person. Now we're getting into the next one, who also was not a doctor, but this is the last one that wasn't. And he was a lawyer from Peru. His name is Rafael Ramas. And I found his choice of being a guest speaker really interesting. Why? Well, first of all, he didn't. And this is gonna sound terrible, but he didn't have a lot to bring to the table. Yes, he was able to bring the law aspect, which is great. Yes, we need the law. We need to get more clearance and more information and stuff like this. But I don't know how it works in Mexico. In the United States, we've seen how that's been when it comes to clearance and laws and lawyers. It hasn't been that great, and it's a really big fight that you have to just keep on going with, right? In Mexico and Peru, I don't know. I think someone can tell me a little bit about it for those that live there. I would love to know. Please fill in the gaps of all of my questions. But aside from this, he mentions in his speech that there needs to be some legal loopholes for science. And I was like, heck yeah. Yes, Mr. Ramos, there you go. But he also mentions that everyone that has been doing research, everyone that is at the panel today, they are very courageous, and we are very lucky to have gotten this far to begin with. But he also mentions that there needs to be scientific research and law working hand in hand. It shouldn't just be one over the other, but with the levels of clearances and information being classified, that's where it gets very difficult, and then things can easily be stamped on as a national security threat, right? Which we hear in the States all of the time. In Mexico, again, I don't know how it's like. I know someone here will give me the answer there, but I found his talking points interesting in the sense of like a one-on-one conversation. Was it appropriate for this hearing? It was okay. I thought it was a little bit more fluff, but once he finishes his speech, that's when we're getting into these scientists, these doctors showing the data, showing the research. And that's what so many people have been very, very hungry for. They were listening, and I think in many respects they delivered in the sense of showing a presentation, showing their data. Now, was there paperwork behind this? I couldn't find any, and that's a little bit of a downfall, I think, for me. But will that paperwork be made public at some point? Will it be peer reviewed? I really, really hope so. It's going to be super beneficial for this entire conversation because there are people that mention, oh, this whole hearing is a joke, and it set us back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Others are saying this is disclosure in the making. Thank you so much, Mexico. You are at the front lines of disclosure. You have these two camps. Which side are you on? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your input on this, on what you thought about this hearing before we continue. Because depending on how your friends react, depending on how your environment reacts, depending on who you follow on social media, they're going to influence how you perceive things. That's just how our brains work. At the end of the day, at the very, very fundamental level, it's about survival. We want to survive, therefore we want to fit in. That's how we survive. So when we surround ourselves by people that are optimistic or pessimistic, it's going to reflect our own mindset as well. And so in the live chat, I was watching it when I could yesterday, and you had those that were like, yeah, and those that were saying, boo. And then others were jumping on the bandwagon, agreeing with one person versus another. So here we have Ramas sharing all that fun stuff about law and science, which again is great, but I think a little bit of fluff here. And Mark Tasaka, thank you for that. If you were enjoying the commentary thus far and the analysis, hit that like button. It lets me know that you're enjoying the show, and it tells YouTube, hey, we want more content like this. So now we're getting into the more factual aspects. And the first thing was we received I wouldn't call it an info video, but I'm going to call it an info video anyway, of the University of San Luis Gonzaga in Ica, Peru, talking about their findings on these mummies. So they weren't just analyzing one; they were analyzing multiple, and they were sharing their information on what they found. But at the end, they said these are not extraterrestrial. Our Our conclusion is still inconclusive. We don't know what it is, but the invitation is open for those that want to conduct their own research. That was great. And I was like, yeah, we get visuals, we get some cool music, we get some cool narration. It kind of breaks up the monotony of people just speaking at a podium, which can be difficult for a lot of people. Not for everyone, but for a good majority. We need a little bit of pictures and a little bit of fun, just touch. But this is about science, not about fun, is it? No, of course not. But now we're getting into, here's more, is another picture of the info video. This is Maria right here, which was a very big type of mummy, and there's been more research that was talked about it in the hearing that we're going to get into. And then these were the 11 scientists that signed the paper, that signed their soul to this research. And they said, we researched these bodies are authentic, we have conducted the best work that we can, and I just signed myself, right? That's the kind of deal that I'm getting here. Okay, when I tried zooming in, can I read any of these names? No. And I was very sad. This video from the live November 7th, it was being streamed from El Canal de Congreso, the Congress channel, which was then being streamed by Jaime Maussan, who hired English translators to speak over those talking in Spanish. And so there's a little bit of lag, and the quality wasn't fantastic, but even on the original channel, the quality wasn't amazing either, so just gotta deal with this. But here we have these 11 scientists, and they signed their name on it. Does that add validity to this conversation? Talking about scientists, it took many years to go through college and get that doctorate degree, number one. It took a lot of money, number two. Number three, they're probably very passionate about it, otherwise you wouldn't have wasted 15, 20 years in school, if not more, because scientists never stop researching, right? They wouldn't classify it as a waste, but instead as nurturing their knowledge and their curiosity, right? Can you make money off of this? Sure, you sure can. Is that the aspect here? I think there's a lot more controversy than there is money. And if you are placing your credentials on the line, your reputation on the line here, it's going to ruin the rest of your life and your income if you aren't on the right side or if you don't actually work in what you believe in. So in some respects, some would suggest, yes, this adds validity. People sign. Could it have been fake? Sure, anything can, but why would it be? Especially when we're talking about a university, which the president of that university actually spoke and said, university's open. If you want to do your research, you totally can. And I love that. That was probably one of my highlights of that 3.5 hour hearing. But now, we are getting into this man. He is French, he's speaking Spanish, and who studied at this that same university, San Luis University in Itabru. His name is Tere Pere, I'm pretty sure. And he, as soon as he started, he said, are these real or fake? And he said, well, during my research, these things are authentic. He started back in 2017 when these mummies' bodies were just beginning to surface. People were getting an interest in them, the information was becoming public. And this is where it gets really, really cool, actually, because here he says, I actually wrote a letter to the Peruvian government to say, hey, you need to protect these bodies in case of treasure hunters. And I called them treasure hunters. That's hilarious. I'm so sorry. But he mentions that there are treasure hunters. And the Peruvian government was like, nah, it's fine. And they didn't even address the issue. But here, this man said, this is legitimate, this needs to be protected, it needs to be kept safe while we conduct our research, and that people don't mess with these bodies or mess with the other items that could potentially be in the graves, which, funny enough, we haven't heard anything about that. We've only heard about bodies being found, but we haven't heard of any relics being found with them, to my knowledge. Now, could I be wrong? Not correct me, please. But if you're gonna correct me, provide the information or the link or whatever on how you received that answer. Because people tell me in the comments, I try to read the comments, I try my best, and they say, Christina, you're wrong, you're so dumb, how could you believe that? And I say, okay, if I'm wrong, that's fine, I don't mind being wrong, But tell me how you came to that conclusion. Why am I wrong? Please find the holes in my argument because that's going to make it better. It's going to make it stronger. It's about having that healthy debate. But when you point your finger and say, "Ah, you're wrong, you're dumb," it doesn't help anybody. Plus, one finger is pointing at you, right, the other person, but three fingers are pointing at yourself. I learned that from my math teacher in high school, and that one hit real hard. Also, he mentions here that these bodies, like the mini ones, could potentially be reptilian or like have reptilian DNA in some respects. He talks about the eggs found in the bodies, which is very strange that people have mentioned could be rocks. And we're going to get into that as we continue on with our scientists, as we continue. But he says here that none of the labs have talked about this entity in previous years, like 2017 onward. But in 2019, he had been convinced to hand them over to the ICA University, the San Luis University, to let researchers make their own analysis. And that was probably the best thing that he could have done. Because when you have real eyes in the sense of like expert eyes, it's going to help any argument, right? We always want to hear information from a doctor. If someone tells me that 9 out of 10 dentists recommend one certain toothpaste, I'll be like, dang, 9 out of 10 dentists? I'm in it to win it. Let's go. I want to make my teeth nice and white and strong. But if you say, well, see, my neighbor over there, who is not a dentist at all, recommended this toothpaste, I'm going to be less inclined to listen to my friend's neighbor versus these 9 unknown dentists. I don't know their background, but they have dentist in their title. Therefore, it's persuasive enough to tell me, they must be right. When in reality, they might not be all the time, but for the most part, we want to hear from experts, right? I saw that ever since September during all these hearings of the experts. We need more eyes on this. And yes, 100% agree with you. We need the millions of eyeballs on this stuff, on the paperwork, on these bodies to give us some real good, dense information. But anyone these days can say, I'm this and I'm that. I'm a doctor, I'm a therapist, I'm a scientist, and you just make it up if you really wanted to. But at some point, society will rip you up if they find you lying. So just don't lie to begin with, okay? Just don't do that. And with all of these speakers, there were questions asked by Jaime and by lawmaker Luna to kind of, in a sense, fill in the gaps of their speech and provide people a little more substance on their research and maybe some common questions. And that's something that I really like that we didn't see in the last one, were these very quick questions between the speaker and the organizers. So I really like that aspect. But he says, this Frenchman, Pierre, says he can confirm that they are definitely not human. Okay? That was like the biggest aspect. And A3M, thank you. He says, I'm from Peru. You should start digging information starting from La Cleva de los Gentiles that string open lots of doors. A minute. That sounds cool. And thank you for the support of the channel. I do appreciate that. Richard says, I can't understand why American scientists weren't involved. This is a valid question. And I think and I could be wrong here, so please correct me if I am wrong. You can correct me all the time, it doesn't bother me. But because this is a Latin American conversation, they were found in Peru, right? Maybe that could be an aspect to this. And then Mexico got their hands on it and started doing their research. And we had a lot of Latin American countries looking into this, such as Peru, Argentina, Mexico, obviously, right? And think about last time, we also saw Brazil, but I don't think looked at it specifically. We saw Japan as well. But it's a valid question. Why weren't Americans involved? Well, what if they were invited and they denied it? Is that a possibility? Sure, it could be. Well, then